What's your daughter's favourite song?
She doesn't really like anything. Oh, she wants... There's like a baby dance song called It's Raining Tacos, which she quite enjoyed, but if I ever listen to it again, I'm going to cut my ears off. So. I do sing her a lot of Irish music, but not like Dropkick Murphys.
No, more like maudlin tales of the old country.
No, like songs about getting pissed and fighting at a wake. You know, Irish music. Watland Street, gentle Irishman, mighty, beautiful, broke so rich and sweet, to rise in the world, he carried out hard.
I love you, Eileen Bjork.
I live by the river with my mother in the house. She washes, I cook, and we never go out.
Well, Martin Dunlop, welcome back to Re-Animates.
Hello, it's good to be back here again. I'm very, very happy to be talking about the wonderful Jeffrey Combs again. I love him.
I mean, I was excited to have you on for this one anyway, even before you told me that despite the frankly ridiculous amount of horror movies you've seen, that you hadn't seen this one.
Seeing it was weird because when I was a kid, this was the one the video store always had. And my thought was every time I saw it was, oh, that looks really cool, but I need to see the first one. But they never had the first one.
No, that's weird.
So it wasn't until I was much older I finally saw Re-Animator.
Oh, actually, you know what I didn't look up? I didn't look up what Bride of Re-Animator was rated compared to the first one. I think that was always an issue with the first Re-Animator was I think it was like rated R. It was like really, I think it was unrated for a lot of the time. Like the initial...
I saw this on Amazon Prime. I don't know if it's a DVD rip or anything, but every time there's like a really full-on gore effect, there's like... the screen goes kind of funny, like they've inserted cut footage in.
Yeah, so that's the version that I have it on DVD. But yeah, you know, I know what you mean. It's the quick jump into slightly grainier, less clear footage, as if another scene has been inserted. And if it's not obvious, if you didn't read the title going into this episode, which would be weird, we're doing Bride of Re-Animator from 1990. I'm finally getting onto the Re-Animators.
I sort of want to like say it high up the top that like, okay, you know, as is the nature of this podcast, I'm going to happily pick the shit out of this movie and point out all the dumb things about it that don't make sense. But ultimately, I did actually really enjoy this. I think this is great. Like, you know, in the same way as like the original Re-Animator, I think the original Re-Animator is a cool film, but it's at its best if you watch it at a film festival with like a big crowd and people are drinking and shouting at the screen and, you know, all of the horrible gore effects happen. You like scream out loud and stuff. Like that's how you should see this kind of movie. And as that kind of movie, like Bride of Re-Animator rocks.
Yeah.
Very cool.
A lot of blood, a lot of stuff happening, a lot of obvious comedy. Like we'll get into it, but I think the original Re-Animator had a lot more subtle black comedy. This
goes out now.
This had outright sort of slapstick and like really obvious comedy stuff. But well, so this was 5 years. This is 1990, 5 years after Re-Animator.
Yeah,
you can kind of tell.
Was it a situation where they'd tried to like go back to the Re-Animator well, and they did From Beyond, which was another H.P. Lovecraft adaptation. That was Stuart Gordon as well, the director of the original. And From Beyond is a very strange movie. Like it really is aiming for the rafters. It's almost like this head trip, reality breaking thing. I can't even, I've seen From Beyond. I couldn't even really tell you what happens in it. It's a very strange movie. Like a lot of fun, and so quite popular now as a cult classic. And so this Bride of Re-Animator very much feels like they're going back to the well. And I'll say, straight out the front, I think too much. That's my biggest criticism of this, is it is absolutely just Re-Animator again.
The main difference between Re-Animator and the subsequent sequels, Bride of Re-Animator and then Beyond Re-Animator, is that they did not involve Stuart Gordon, which I think is obvious when you watch it, for good or ill, because obviously who eventually went on, directed them, Brian Usner, who was the producer from the first Re-Animator film, he has his own strengths as well. Yeah,
no, I was thinking, I don't, my criticisms of this aside, I love Usner. He's the guy who did Society.
Wonderful.
Film we've definitely talked about on this podcast before.
Yes.
He's,
Ben Volchok is a big fan of that one.
Yeah. He also directed Necronomicon, which we did, the 1990s Necronomicon, which we saw, obviously, I love, and is also a film that I think doesn't get enough love from people. Yeah, I would definitely recommend people checking that one out, because it's such a fun time at the movies. And the thing, all of those films, Necronomicon and Bride of Re-Animator, Society, the thing they all have in common is Brian Yuzna's a producer mainly, who also directs films, And he brings this producer's mindset where his films have their problems as they go along, but he has to nail you in the end. The last act has to like bring it home.
Well, that's what's interesting about this one, and we'll talk about that in a minute. So this was written also by Zeph E. Daniel and Rick Fry, who also wrote Society. For whatever reason, Zeph E. Daniel almost always uses a pseudonym. When I was looking on his IMDb, almost every film he's worked on has the pseudonym Woody Keith.
So strange.
All right. I don't know. You don't like your name? I don't mind. This was also Rick Fry's second last ever screenplay. He has 3 credits and then he got the hell out of Dodge.
There's some stuff in this where it's like the man can write a zingy little camp little one-liner. Plot construction, there's some issues.
Yeah. So apparently Jeffrey Combs wasn't even going to return for this sequel. I'm not sure if he was resisting just getting tarred with that brush again, because unfortunately, even outside of Re-Animator, he has been given a lot of very similar roles. Lots of doctors, lots of Herbert Westy types of guys, and he probably didn't want to get bogged down in that role.
Yeah, really typecast as Herbert West.
Yeah.
But the unfortunate thing is he's so good at it.
Yes,
he's so good.
Yeah. I can't imagine what this film would have been without him.
We're back in the same hospital. We're back in the morgues again.
Yeah.
We're doing the same shit over and over again. But fortunately, we do get to spend that time with wonderful Herbert West.
Yes.
Who is transformed from what was the subtle subtext of a peevish homosexual lover into just full-blown angry boyfriend.
He's such a jealous bitch in this movie.
It's...
There's so many moments where he's just... You imagine him filing his nails angrily in the corner of the room. Well, this is what Brian Yuzna said in an interview with Mondo Exploito. This is what he said about the film. It's certainly impossible to live up to the original. As a sequel, it has its very rough spots, with acting, with directing, with the coverage, even though we tried to shoot as much as we could, and I don't think the ending is emotionally satisfying. There are a lot of things about it that I certainly cringe at. It's just not told as well as I would have liked it to be. I certainly didn't have then and didn't now have the ability that Stewart has to direct actors and his storytelling abilities. I think mostly what comes through for me that works is that it is like Re-Animator. It does have a new story. It kind of creates another world, and there's certainly parts of it I really like. I like the delirium of the ending. There's sort of an operatic feel to it. I like all that. It did go over pretty well. I think Fangoria magazine, which was like the Bible back then, voted it the best horror film of the year. So that made me feel really good. I wish it was better than it is, but hey, it is what it is. Interesting that he said that, because like I think that most people who were big fans of Re-Animator at the time, I think would have been so happy for a sequel, and I think that they would have liked how much of it was similar to the original.
As I've said, if you go to the movies to see a 1980s, this was shot in the 80s, so I think of it as an 80s splatter film, like Night of the Demons or whatever. This delivers what you want from that kind of thing.
Oh, yeah.
You know,
it has a million ideas.
Yeah, it's a definitely, like Brian Yuzna and the special effects artist on this, who deserves...
Screaming Mad George.
Japanese
our favourite guy.
Rock musician, Screaming Mad George.
Mm-hmm.
They work together a lot as a team, and
yep.
It feels like this is in a lot of ways their film. Yeah, it's a really, beautifully made example of their craft, if nothing else.
Yeah. It's obviously different, I think, enough to Re-Animator to set it apart, but I think that maybe Yuzna wanted it to be more different.
I think we should get into it, because pretty immediately you come up with, like, the problem of it not being different enough.
Yeah.
In a very interesting way. So
we open on David Gale's head. Dr. Hill's floating head. Because obviously we expect that he died at the end of the first one. And I think that...
his head got crushed.
He got crushed.
So dead.
There's no reason for him to still be... to have a head. But yeah, so we open on his floating head and he's cursing Herbert West and promising revenge. It's a great shot. It's just this hanging head sort of floating in space. Lots of blood, mad eyes, evil laugh. Very menacing.
It's great. It's like something... It's like a video game boss. Like taunting you at the start of the level.
Yeah. Herbert West, your prince is in another castle. David Gale is terrifying in this. Like, he's upsetting in the first one because he's A, a creep, B, a rapist, and C, just has an overall kind of very menacing, creepy vibe.
Very long head. Him and the Carradines and like John Glover, the villainous actors who like have a lot of head going on. A long, dangly head.
In this, because he has been dead, he is even more terrifying. So we cut to Peru in South America. We're told by some text on the screen that Doctors Herbert West and Dan Kane are finishing their tour as volunteer medics in a bloody civil war. Herbert West doesn't seem like the volunteering type, I might hear you say, but...
So they've gone to be doctors in this civil war in order to get fresh bodies for their continuing experiments into the secrets of life.
I feel like it's mostly Herbert's idea. They're working on a patient who dies, and Herbert is right back with it with his serum. Like, he's like immediately like, we got a specimen, let's have a go. And obviously Dan is like, no, we can't. It's like, Dan, how are you not on board with this by now? Like, how are you now still going, don't, Herbert, come on?
Yeah, either leave or take part.
Yeah.
It's very strange that you're still here. And there's a lot of explosions and gunfire, all sound effects. All we see is just the inside of this tent, obviously.
Well, Dan is still a mess. Like, there's 2 separate scenes in this where a patient dies and he collapses into a heap on the floor.
There's some other pressures going on in his life in those scenes, but...
Yes. So a woman enters and tells them they have to go. This is Fabiana Udenio as Francesca.
Better known as A Lot of Vagina from the
Austin
Austin
Powers.
Powers movies.
Yep.
Which is a name... I was thinking about it when we were watching this. And A Lot of Vagina is a name that annoys me a bit as a parody name, just because... it's less ridiculous than Pussy Galore. Like,
both A Lot of Vagina and Pussy Galore are very strange jokes, because the idea that one woman has a lot of pussy, that's not like a compliment. Is that something that would be attractive to you in a woman? Like, oh, that woman, she has a lot of vagina.
I mean, you may prefer quality over quantity, but like, yeah.
So this actress, look, she's doing her best. Not a great actress, I'm going to say.
She also, the character is unnecessary for reasons that will become like immediately apparent, but she runs in and they're working away on this body that Herbert brings back to life, and then it just starts screaming and being violent, like they all do when they get the reagent, so he shoots it dead.
Yes.
There's more explosions and more gunfire. Now, this is going to be a thing throughout the movie. I just want to point out that in Re-Animator, every time he uses the reagent, all it does is turn someone into a violent lunatic, drooling and trying to kill you.
Yep.
That happens every time in this. But he comes to Dan and says, Dan, I can bring your girlfriend back to life. And Dan's like, well, okay, even though it's never worked.
Yeah. It's ridiculous that Herbert West has not figured out correlation and causation yet.
Like, it's just, the scientific experiments actually don't seem to be progressing that well.
But Herbert West is very optimistic.
Oh, and we get, very importantly, Dan says the reagent won't work or whatever, and Herbert West seizes a lizard.
Yeah.
And delivers the line, the lizards are the key, Dan.
Yeah.
Apropos, kind of apropos of nothing.
I love the use of the iguana in this movie. I love the way he forces it in Dan's face and then gives it a little pat before he puts it down. If you're interested, dear listener, the DVD and Blu-ray of Bride of Re-Animator is very useful because it comes with Jeff Combs and Bruce Abbott, who plays Dan Kane, doing audio commentary, just the 2 of them. And it is a blast. They are having fun, and it is really funny. And I think in that point, Bruce Abbott just says something like, "You're always just shoving things in my face." Yeah, so Francesca does see West shoot the convulsing patient. She gets the wrong idea. And pretty soon Dan is, as he usually is, torn between Herbert West telling him what to do, one thing, and a woman telling him to do another.
Yeah, it's real fickle.
So Herbert is now no longer just about reanimating the dead, but about creating new life, which is sort of what he was doing in the old one.
I mean, I didn't even notice that about the movie particularly. It is, so very importantly, I did watch Bride of Frankenstein for this as well. It is the subtext of Bride of Frankenstein, and it is also incorporating this into the dialogue until the ending, where Herbert has like a full-blown monologue about how he'll do better than any womb. But yeah, so that is something that they combine. But when I read about this film going into it, that this is sort of a riff on Bride of Frankenstein, and it isn't really. It's like there are themes in common, and there's moments where you realize that the the writers probably watched Bride of Frankenstein. It's not really a similar film. Like, Bride of Frankenstein is this beautiful 1940s shot, like one of the loveliest films ever made, kind of on this big, sort of Hollywood scale. And the differences in plot, are huge. The only similarity is there's a doctor character called Dr. Pretorius, who is this morally bankrupt character who lures Henry Frankenstein back into the process of creating the dead with what appears to be like homoerotic intentions.
Pretorius is the name of the Doctor from Beyond.
There's so lots of people have seen this movie.
It's quite popular.
And yeah, in the same way, if you imagine Bride of Re-Animator, Herbert is the Pretorius luring Dan back into this world with homoerotic subtext. Like, we don't need women to do this. We can make new life together, you and I, if we try hard enough.
Yes.
Kind of.
So they have to escape. This big fight with soldiers ensues. Dan is stabbed, and Herbert says, "Let's go home," which, if it wasn't followed immediately by, the very creepy Reanimator / Psycho theme music, you'd think would be quite a nice line.
The story of Herbert West Reanimator is in multiple chapters, and there is this whole section where they go to the First World War, and Herbert's using the bodies of the First World War to sort of reanimate and create this army of undead that sort of work underneath him. And it is this big, elaborate idea. And so with Bride of Re-Animator, when it opens in Peru, you're like, wow, they're going really big. It's going to be crazy. International locations, we're going huge. And the end of that scene is him going, "We're going home.
Yep.
Welcome back to that hospital corridor we were in before."
Yep. Back at Miskatonic.
I hate it. It's such a punch in the gut as far as like when you want this to be a bigger sequel and an escalation, and it's not.
Well, at Miskatonic, Dan is treating a very ill patient called Gloria, played by Kathleen Kinmont, who was in Halloween 4. She's also the lead in a movie that I absolutely have to see, which is called Rollerblade Warriors Taken by Force from 1989. Here's the plot. In the future, a warrior nun on roller skates must rescue a seer who is to be sacrificed by a band of mutants. There's nothing there that's bad. Also, I only just realised that it's rollerblades in the title, but the nun is on roller skates. Well, I'm going to have to watch it to figure out which one it is, because that makes all the difference.
Well, because of the habit and everything, you need sort of more stable ground that 4 wheels would offer. On 2 wheels, she's just going to kill her ankle.
Rollerblades do not have 2 wheels; they have 4 wheels in a line.
Yeah, inline skates. It's just not gonna. It's not gonna give you the coverage that you need as a Bride of Christ.
So the way Herbert just stares at Dan as he's being very soft and caring to Gloria, it's just so funny how much he hates any woman that invades their lives, their precious little marriage that they have going on. He's just
the Garth Marenghi thing of I've met writers who use subtext and they're all cowards.
Also, Dan, deeply unprofessional the way he's obviously in love with Gloria. Very unethical, Dan.
Yeah, no. Well, he falls in love with literally every woman he meets, I will point out.
Yeah.
In this film. Also, we've skipped over the credits that I just will observe. It's basically the Reanimator credits of like spinning body parts shot from strange angles while that like funky music goes on. Very driving. But then, a gentle soft love scene. And what's that? A titty. You see, there's a woman now because it's Bride of Re-Animator. That's what we all came here for. Gentle woman, like, revolving while lovely music plays.
Woman shape.
What's that, an ovary? Whoa! Cameron, whoa.
They should have made a little cartoon of someone sliding down a fallopian tube, like a water slide. Herbert already has eyes on her body, though, because she is apparently terminal.
Yes.
So he's, like, looking at her like a cut of meat. Quite literally.
I love the line as well as Dan is talking to the terminally ill patient. He says, "You put makeup on," and she's like, "It's because my head's the only part of me that isn't sick." And Jeffrey just steamrolls in there, shines his flashlight and says, "Yes, that part's quite well," and then walks up.
He has very arrogant, condescending camp energy, all of that in one.
We don't want a woman in here; she'd throw off our rhythm entirely. And that fluttering around. We don't want that, do we, Dan?
Yeah, it's very fluttering around like Henry Higgins.
Yes. No. There is I would love to see
Herbert West coming up to Dan and being like, why can't a woman be more like a man? So after this, we meet Lieutenant Leslie Chapman, played by Claude Earl Jones, who's a big TV guy, going to see pathologist Wilbur Graves, played by Mel Stewart, another big TV guy, because he's still investigating the Miskatonic Massacre that was the end of the first movie, which is what they're calling it. Leslie brings him Dr. Hill's head. Apparently, it had been found on the sideshow circuit.
Though then he says, so the head hasn't been talking to anyone or anything. So this was just a head on the sideshow?
Yeah, that's what's like. Imagine paying money for a carnival and being like, hey guys, look at this head.
Actually, I take that back. That's actually something that would be pretty insane to see in a carnival. Like, you would be like, I think that was a human head. There was some blood coming out.
They both note that all of the remains from that night are remarkably well preserved. There's also a bottle of reagent just amongst, like, in the room where all the remains from that night are. Apparently a lot of body parts have been going missing from the morgue, though. Who could possibly be doing such a thing?
Yes.
And then we immediately cut to Herbert West.
Hey! There's a lot of almost sitcom level cut.
I think literally the shot is Graves saying, who would want to steal body parts? And then literally the next cut is Herbert West peeking around a door.
Yeah, no, sort of nonchalantly, like, strolling into the morgue.
Herbert is shopping for parts amongst the dead stuff at the morgue, and he finds Meg's heart. It's just in a bag. He finds Dr. Hill's head in there and has a bit of a chat with it.
You had such pretensions of grandeur, you pompous plagiarist. But look at you now. You're nothing but a dead head. A no body.
That bit's lovely, and it's also one of the more fun camera moves in the film. The little fisheye lens that they give the head.
Herbert has much more of an obvious sense of humor in this film. Like, he's actually cracking jokes.
He is cracking jokes, and he appears to have gone completely mental.
Oh, of course.
Like, his love of Dan has truly driven him over the edge. And the things he does, not even out of, like, evil or curiosity, he's doing fucked things sort of out of boredom. Yeah.
A number of things he does in this movie are for no good reason. He is both fucking around and finding out. So we cut to Dan and Herbert's house because for some reason they live together.
They live together in a cemetery.
Isn't that a beautiful paranormal romance? Like, that's the kind of thing that when you're an angsty goth teen, you write a story about you and your boyfriend living in a house in a cemetery together.
Dan arrives and he heads down to the basement where Herbert is continuing his experiments, of course.
Mm-hmm. I like the way he pops out of the wall in this bit.
Yeah, so he's invented a new way to kill people without doing any damage to them, which is important to the last film, because in Re-Animator he says the reason they've never successfully reanimated someone is the process of their death was too traumatic, so the body's too damaged.
Yep.
And you always end up with a fucked up screaming person.
Yeah, so he invents just a sort of like a chloroform sort of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. The thing I like about Dan and Herbert's house, a lot of lamps. Just a huge amount of lamps. And they all switch on at the same time when he turns the lights on. Interesting. But most importantly, there's a big basement, which looks a lot like the basement from the first movie.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hospital looks the same as the first movie.
Yeah.
Basement looks the same as the first movie.
Yeah. So yeah, they live basically in the cemetery, very useful for finding specimens. And Herbert pops out and he realizes that they basically share a wall with an old crypt, which comes back later. Herbert makes them a new pet, which I love. I love this. He is like a big happy child in this movie. He is giggling like a child as he joins a bunch of fingers and an eyeball together and uses his reagent to make this little spider thing. It's so cute.
Yeah, this is also where Dan shows too much insight into it for what he does for the rest of the film, where he says, why are you still doing things like this, Herbert? More of this morbid doodling. And it's like, he's right. What are you doing?
Yeah.
You made a fucked spider thing. He reminds me of that old tweet someone had about God looking at a human. What the fuck is this? You've taken a monkey and made it sad. Like, what?
Yeah, he's just...
It's got anxiety. What are you doing?
Morbid doodling is right. Like, the little spider guy has no use. He's just fucking around. He's just like, I don't need to take a body. I can reanimate parts, basically.
Yeah, but so fucking what?
Because he can, Martin.
But it's not useful. It's not that. If the whole idea was you were going to be able to like bring people back from the dead, what are you doing?
Are you telling me that the little spider guy is not useful? He could be the new all-American house pet.
Yeah, Dan says to Herbert in these scenes, he's like saying to him, why don't we publish our findings? And Herbert's like, people would steal our research. No, they would give you money and
to
in
continue
order
the
to,
research,
and they could get the reagent. Like, this would probably all be a lot easier to do if there's money.
Dan ruins his mood though, because he's so happy with his little pet. But Dan ruins his mood by telling him that he wants to move out, and they have this big classic bickering couple fight. I think that one of the running jokes with Bruce Abbott and Jeffrey Combs is that whenever they're on screen acting like an old married couple, they call them the Bickersons. And Herbert really gets him on side by revealing that he has Meg's heart. And they can create new life starting with Meg's heart. The way he presents it to him with two hands. It is amazing how easily Dan is swayed. He was absolutely ready to move out and give up on Herbert West 2 minutes ago. And then Herbert has to just pepper in a few phrases, a few little ideas, planting the seed.
You're leaving me for a woman. Well, what if I gave you a woman? Gets real dark in here. Also, stray observation, Dan's wearing a very comfortable looking sweater in this.
Oh, yes. I love that sweater.
It's a good sweater. It's a good big green one. It's real cold in Melbourne at the moment. It's very empty. But yeah, I mean, apart from anything else, Dan's a doctor, right? So when you offer him a heart and you say, this is the heart of your ex-girlfriend, we can make it beat again, the doctor knows that doesn't do anything.
Yeah. As a doctor, he should know that.
That's like a toe. I know that Herbert's making a whole point about how, like, the center of living isn't in the hippocampus or whatever that complicated thing is.
Yep.
But it's still not living inside the muscle that we can actually swap in and out of a person's body and they don't change personalities. Like.
Yeah, I don't know why Dan thinks that he can get Meg back this way.
Yeah, Dan goes for it 100%.
Big, beautiful himbo. So in the meantime, our little hand spider escapes. Like running out the door.
And Dan's worried about the police, but don't worry because Herbert says the police will never come here. Smash cut.
Yeah. Yeah.
What?
The timing on that was too silly. So they're visited by the lieutenant. He's very smarmy and nasty.
Because you assume that Herbert has killed a lot of innocent people or reanimated the bodies of innocent people and then made them do fucked things. You kind of wonder, like, why is this detective giving off such this constant air of slime? Like, everything about him is gross. The way he's filmed is gross. He's kind of sweaty. He's a miserable-looking creature, questioning them about the massacre at the hospital. Yeah,
he has bad vibes. So this whole scene, while the lieutenant is trying to question them, because he already assumes that they know something that they're not telling him, so he's going in with suspicion already. But in the meantime, like, the little spider is like crawling around on the couch and stuff, and Dan's trying to get it. But unfortunately, the lieutenant crushes him accidentally with a book. I wanted that spider to stay in the whole movie, just like scuttling in the background of every scene.
You wanted it to be like Ash's hand in Evil Dead 2.
What I wanted was for Herbert to adopt him as a sidekick. Like, imagine Herbert working on something and the little hand spider's just sitting on his shoulder, like looking, like, arr! I wanted him to be like Gizmo. Herbert puts a little Santa hat on him when it's Christmas.
But the thing that would be, if they did do that, that's a nice idea, just because that would be a closer reach towards the reagent doing something that isn't fucked. Because every other thing that you make just tries to kill you, whereas this little hand dude's happy just scampering around.
Yeah, he was having a great time. Oh, imagine imagine the little hand guy, like, singing like the Mogwai.
At the end, when Herbert has to leave, like, the little spider tries to follow him and he's like, no, go home. And it's like, oh.
I never wanted you anyway. He's got a little hat on his eyeball. Whoever out there is listening and is a good illustrator, please draw me that. So Graves is back in the lab. He's experimenting with the reagent on a bat.
Graves is that mortuary assistant from before who's been interviewed by the detective.
Yeah, he's working on a bat, and it works. The bat's not happy, though.
Yeah, he puts reagent into the bat, and the bat comes back to life and is a shit, because everything that gets the reagent is a dick.
Yep, it's very unhappy. It attacks him. After this, Herbert and Dan have an ingenious plan. They're going to smuggle out a corpse from the hospital as if it's a real person. This fucking Weekend at Bernie's shit that's happening. So, but while this is happening, Graves reanimates Hill's head, and his voice is terrifying throughout this movie. Like, because he doesn't sound like he did in the first movie. He has this low gravel, very sinister, lots of long S's.
Herbert, you bastard!
Yeah, like West.
He's showing off his long teeth.
It is fun though when Hill plays dead when Graves tries to show him to an orderly, because that's like Michigan J. Frog. Like, come on, you were talking before. And then he comes back to life when he's alone.
Yeah, I also like when Hill gets brought back to life and then immediately roasts Graves for being a creationist.
Yeah. When Dan are outside with the clearly dead patient, a handsome dog leads Dan to Francesca.
Dan falls in love with her because every woman that he meets, he immediately falls completely in love with.
Yes, he's seen her again for all of 15 seconds. Herbert says this, which, for all of Herbert's failings, is kind of accurate in Dan's case.
Don't let the little head rule the big head, Dan.
Such a bitchy.
Yeah.
Like, it's such a eye-rolling. Like,
Yeah.
I think women and semen don't mix.
Yeah. Oh, God, they are like Burns and Smithers.
Yeah.
Oh, my God. So Dan invites Francesca over for dinner because he loves her immediately.
Oh, right, the corpse is in the house!
Yeah.
Fucking... Anyway.
It doesn't even consider it. Come over to my house where I have a death lab. The lieutenant starts questioning Francesca, and he takes her to show her the survivors of the massacre.
I don't like that we're covering the same ground from the first film. It's why I don't like the detective thing in general. Because, like, I saw the first film, and even if I hadn't, when you make the sequel, make it so that's not necessary.
He basically just explains to her what happened that night, shows her the reanimated dead who have been put into a psychiatric asylum, because doctors just think that they're insane. One of the people in this asylum is the lieutenant's wife, who attacks Francesca.
I do like the dead a lot. I think they're great. Weirdly, in a film that has nothing to do with H.P. Lovecraft, really, in its heart or in its themes or in its goals or whatever, there's something very upsetting at the idea that someone could come along and, like, stab you with a needle and you turn into these things.
So Herb and Dan are working on their new body, their collection of parts. There's a lot of smoke, blood, nerves, muscles, veins, very visceral. So Dan is very pessimistic. Again, it's like, Dan, shit or get off the pot. Like, you're either into this or just go and be like a normal doctor.
The Bride in question does look gross. It also, like, immediately says to Dan, whatever you make out of this is going to be gross, even if this works.
Yeah.
Like, this does not seem like a promising enterprise.
Yeah, this isn't going to be a woman that you can, like, take out on a date. This is going to be what it is, which is a collection of body parts strung together. He also, while they're working, realizes that he completely forgot about his hot date, and Francesca...
The date!
Oh, no! Scrambling around. Francesca comes over, and she brought her dog. I don't think I'd bring a dog on a first date.
You might. What if this person said they really liked your dog?
Yeah, I suppose. See, I would, but I don't think I'm indicative of the normal population.
You're not indicative of good ideas.
No, I think a dog would be a bit of a cock blocker, really. The lieutenant also appears outside, so he's obviously, like, stalking Dan and Herbert. Dan and Francesca are flirting in the kitchen, and pretty soon they're just in bed together. Herbert's very unhappy about it. He just keeps, like, every time they cut to the lab, he's looking upwards, like looking up, where...
Angrily.
Where Dan's wall would be, just looking up, like, angry, but also, like, pitying this poor fool who's being taken in by women.
Hope she remembered to take her shoes off when she came in. Oh.
Which is, I mean, that's about as close to what I imagine H.P. Lovecraft was like. I imagine he was the kind of person who went around being like, women are only a distraction from the work. Well, he's in the lab playing with parts. He's so jealous. There's a very cute moment, though. Like, this whole scene is so much fun. He's working on a leg. He's trying to reanimate the leg. It starts twitching, and he realizes it's reanimated, and he starts like tickling the foot.
It might be cute, but it's also fulfilling someone's real specific fetish.
It's one of the few moments in any of the Reanimator films where Herbert actually seems genuinely happy. It's very sweet. He's quickly annoyed though because he keeps remembering that Dan's upstairs having sex.
He weds the foot to a hand, making a foot hand.
I would argue a leg arm. Yeah, again, he's just fucking around.
Yeah, and almost out of boredom. Like, what have you created there, Herbert?
A leg arm. And he hates it
done?
immediately. Like, as soon as it becomes reanimated, this leg arm, it's just one long twitching thing. The leg kicks him in the face, the arm tries to strangle him, and then he puts the whole thing into a bin bag. It's so funny seeing him do that. He doesn't do anything medical in that bit. He doesn't go, I'll cut it in half.
Let's see what it does. I'll make notes or something.
No. He just puts it in a bin.
He makes this stupid thing, wraps it in a bin bag like the screaming rabid weasels from Return of the Living Dead, and then heaves it into the crypt.
The whole scene, though, is so funny. Like, from the start of that scene, it's free of dialogue, and it's just Jeff doing, like, silent comedy. Like, physical comedy. It's really good. Like, you always forget how good he is at that stuff. Like, when he is given the chance where it's just basically him and some props and a camera to really fuck around and have fun, he's very, very good at it. So when Herbert goes downstairs, the lieutenant is there, waiting for him in the shadows like an absolute creep.
Yeah.
He's very pushy. He forces himself into the basement. He's a bit unhinged at this point. Like, he's not super calm when we first meet him, but he's very unhinged now because I think he knows that Herbert and Dan are up to some business.
Mm.
So he's checking out all of Herbert and Dan's little projects. And then when the lieutenant starts chewing Herbert out, Herbert reminds him that his wife didn't actually die in the massacre. She died from multiple blows to the head. So the cop is a wife beater.
Yeah,
shocking.
Killed his wife.
Shocking, yeah. Herbert knocks him out with some chloroform stuff, but Dan comes downstairs to, like, investigate, and he finds Herbert with a cop who's dead. But he does take advantage of having a fresh corpse there.
Mm.
When in Rome.
I mean, how angry could the detective be if we bring him back?
Yeah, I'm sure he would love that. Dan is so pissy in this scene. He's just like, oh, damn it, Herbert. Why I order? I think that, if it was like a cartoon, like, Dan would have been like, Herbert, and then Herbert would have been like, ain't I a stinker? And it would, like, zoom in on his face. Little Herbie, what's he done now? Also, someone draw that for me, please. Herbert says this, which is quite funny.
He's a wife beater, Dan. Use the gun.
That's my favorite line.
Yeah.
Film. That's so good.
It's a good point. Dan's shirt somehow gets pulled off in this scene. What a tragedy.
Oh, yeah. No. And he just can't find it again for so long.
Yeah. Oh, what a drag. The cop escapes but he does, despite, like, most of the other zombies don't, but he has the mental wherewithal to lock them in the basement.
Mm.
So, he's not the sort of primal beast that most of the other zombies have been. Francesca goes downstairs to see what's going on, Nosy Parker. Sees the cop acting very strangely, and the cop kills her dog.
Mm.
Boo. I mean, it doesn't look great, like the fake dog, so it didn't upset me as much as, like, other horror films which have done something similar. Dan breaks down the door. Herbert escapes through the crypt. Herbert also picks up Francesca's dead dog and takes it into the lab. Don't. What are you doing? What are you doing, mate?
He literally, this is the thing, is everything about him is insane and no longer makes sense, and he's no longer towards some greater aim. Like,
no.
We're not really going anywhere with Herbert. We're just supposed to enjoy it as we go.
In the morning, Francesca wakes up before Dan and goes down to the basement because she hears a dog barking.
Mm.
But she wakes up to see that Herbert has attached a man's arm to her dog's body.
Because it was missing a leg, and he didn't want it to be wandering around with only 3 legs.
She's suitably upset, though. Back at the hospital, Dan goes to see Gloria because he fucking loves her, because he loves everybody. He tells her that he likes to think of her as the Meg who lived. It's not the compliment you think it is, Dan.
Yeah, he's in love with Fabiana. He's also in love with Gloria. He was in love with Megan. He saw a drawing of a particularly beautiful woman on the wall. He's in love with that.
He's in love with a shapely tree.
He's in love with the sand dunes at moonlight.
He's in love with a corn cob. And he's in love with Herbert. in his own way.
No, see, that's the only one he's not in love with.
No, he does love him.
It kills Herbert.
No.
It kills him.
He loves Herbert, but he doesn't know how to express it, which is why he keeps being dragged into his plans. It's why he can't leave, Martin. He can't bear to leave him. Gloria soon flatlines. Herbert and Dan try to save her, but she's gone. Dan collapses.
And it is such a violent attempt to save her. They rip the whole rib cage open. I kind of enjoy this in that it's a non-reanimator business, just regular scene of surgery, and it's still tomato ketchup all over the walls.
Oh, of course, yeah. Dan has a couple of goes with the electricity paddles, and then Herbert is just like, "I'm going in," and just starts slicing and dicing. I think he's massaging her heart. I think that's what that is. Graves is taking care of Hill's head. He keeps trying to get Graves to take him to West. And Graves, in order to shut him up, he shoves an apple in his mouth and wraps him up like a burrito in a towel and just tosses him into an office bin. Like, he doesn't even put him in a big dumpster outside. He puts them in, the bin in his room. And Francesca, despite everything that's happened, goes to see Dan at the hospital. And the nurse tells him he's gone home. What do you think she was hoping for with that interaction? After the night they had on their first date.
It's so weird. It's the kind of thing that happens all the time in these movies, though, where, basically the woman is a plot device and her only job is to fall in love with the male character. You don't really know why they've come there. And because they have to serve the plot, of course she can't possibly leave him alone. Of course she's going to forgive him for, the Ed Gein room in the basement. There's no reason for her to have come back.
Yeah, because one of the last things she says to him before she leaves on that night is, "I hate you, you're a monster."
Yeah, and he really is. Considering what you've seen, he absolutely is. We've also, there's a moment when Herbert gets on the phone to get the Gloria's body taken care of. And, it's implied he has some plans for Gloria's body. And the nurse is listening to him through the window, and there's a wonderful little Hitchcock moment of him just gently turning the Venetian blind.
Yeah, they're both staring at each other as he's closing the blinds on her. It's great.
When does he say this thing about "you're better off without her"?
I think it's when she leaves in the basement earlier, yeah.
Oh, Dan, you're better off without her.
Better off without her. There's a fun scene where Herbert is taking Dan back in the lab through the various parts they've brought together to create their new woman. It's the closest I think Herbert can feel to sexual pleasure, is him going through this collection of parts. And Dan is on board. I mean, you can imagine, here's a little bit of Herbert's body tour.
The arms of a waitress. The lawyer's hand. Case dismissed. And look at this delicate piece. What do you think? A sculptress? A harpist? Would you believe? A murderess? But they're all equal now. Nothing but cast-off remnants of a meaningless existence.
He's having a whale of a time there.
There's in Bride of Frankenstein, they find the body of a young woman in the crypt. Dr. Pretorius finds it with his two murderous henchmen. They find her 19 years old. This girl, that's the right one. Get her ready. And the final shot is just a zoom in on Dr. Pretorius' face. And he says sternly, "Let's hope her bones are firm."
What does that mean?
Fun.
Back to Graves. Reanimated cop guy. He has helped Dr. Hill's head escape the bin, and he forces Graves to attach the wings from the bat from earlier to the sides of Hill's head. A perfectly normal request. He then locks Graves in the freezer. So the cop accosts Francesca at the hospital when she's trying to call Dan, and he tells her that Dan and Herb did this to him and that he is going to get revenge. Everybody wants revenge on these guys. They've got a lot coming to them.
Well, it's understandable because they're building a Frankenhooker in the basement. Yeah, the links with Frankenhooker. This was the part of the film where I kind of couldn't get a good look at the body.
Because it's covered in sort of mesh netting.
Yeah, it's like it got a gauze thing on it. And it also, that whole scene when they're having that dialogue, it really hammers home that this is whatever else is happening in the plot, all these other characters we've created, what's happening in the scene is your coded gay lover has built you a woman to fuck out of the parts of hot girls because you aren't attracted to him. That's what we're looking at. That's ultimately what this film is about. You know, and you understand it in that moment, and that's how Combs is playing it. Like, that's
a fun little moment. And I guess this is fun for people that know a bit more about H.P. Lovecraft. It's kind of a nod to people that like Lovecraft because Herb and Dan, they hear some scrabbling behind the rock walls of the lab. And Dan says, must be rats in the walls.
Yeah.
Which is, for those who don't know, the title of a H.P. Lovecraft story is The Rats in the Walls.
Yeah, and also they're not rats in the walls. Anyway, we'll get to that later.
So Dan asks to be the one to inject the reagent into Meg's heart. And Herbert is so touched by that. Like, he's like, oh, my boy, and they grow up so fast.
Yeah.
He even puts a hand on his shoulder as he's doing it, like, proud dad.
And the anticipation in this scene is so great. You want to see this thing get brought to life so much.
Yeah.
You want to see how fucked this thing is. Come on, guys, we'll get it together.
Well, yeah, because the bride, you know, despite her being the point of the film, has a relatively small role. She doesn't appear until probably an hour into the movie. There's a buzz on the doorbell. Herb tears himself away from his work.
He's got a cute little hip holster for his gun that I
Yeah.
thought was very, very interesting little touch.
Yeah, when he put that on, I was like, oh, he's going to wear it. Okay. Herbert finds a wooden crate on the doorstep, and at the same time, Francesca is going over to their house. Herbert opens the box, and Dr. Hill's head flies out, flaps around the room. Remember that viral video a while ago of the Irish family with the bat in their house?
Catch him, Derry. Catch him. Catch him, Derry. Bigger towel, that's it. Get him now.
Yeah, that's what it's like. Unfortunately, the cop has broken out the massacre survivor zombies and brought them all to the West Kane home.
In the first Re-Animator, the bodies have a psychic link too, don't they? And Hill can, like, command them.
I don't know if it's that, because there's also the implication in the first one, and it's not clear because of how many scenes are deleted. In the first Re-Animator, Hill is supposed to have hypnotic powers. So there's a lot of scenes that are unclear because scenes have been cut out. But there's a number of scenes where Hill actually does hypnotize people in the film to do their bidding. It's very obvious how much has been cut out in the scene where he goes to visit Herbert in the lab and takes his notes. There's supposed to be a whole bit there where he basically hypnotizes Herbert by staring at him. So I don't know if that's meant to be the case. Eventually, our bride awakens. She's very tall now. She has twitchy movements and she's obviously very confused. Dan falls to his knees in front of her. He is overwhelmed by what they've achieved. And I would argue they've done pretty well. They made a person.
This is one of the things I actually don't like as much about the film. I don't like the bride very much.
As in the design?
Yeah, the design. I kept thinking that we weren't getting a good shot of her, but then we actually do. Once she's up and walking around, we get a bunch of, like, up and down shots where you really get to take in the detail. And it's sort of too, like, busy, and it looks like all the other bodies in the film. It's a film full of bodies, and hers really isn't, like, distinctive enough. If you think of, like, Bride of Frankenstein or Frankenhooker, I can't really draw, but I could basically draw what those look like. Like, I could give you an idea of the shape. And I couldn't really do that with this.
There's a lot of elements with the bride in this one, because not only is she made of, like, meat and sinew and human stuff, she's also got a lot of metal parts, like metal sort of braces that are bringing various bones and stuff together, or acting as bones perhaps. But then she's also wearing kind of rags. I mean, she's not wearing
they're meant to be like medical dressings.
Why didn't they buy a pretty dress for their bride to wake up in?
Yeah, I think it's sad that, you know, the film is Bride of Re-Animator, and Screaming Out George is such a good, you know, special effects guy. And so many of the little dudes running around in this, the weird little contraptions that they create are so great. And the bride is a bit of a miss and not something that you remember from this movie.
I mean, I do. I like a lot of the design. I especially do like those middle. I like the idea of mixing the metal with the human flesh. I find that quite upsetting in a great way. So Francesca manages to get into the house. She's looking at the zombies. Herbert is trying to find Hillbat, but Dan comes in to show off their lady, and Herbie is so happy. There's a fun moment when Herbert, he's sort of touching the bride, admiring her, and she she's a bit startled by him. She shies away from him, wanting to stay close to Dan. And Herbert's upset. And he says, I made you. She's very, like, infantile because she was just born.
Mm.
So a lot is happening all at once in this scene. So we've got Hillbat flying around. Francesca's in there. She's like, Dan, they're coming. You got zombies coming into the house. Herb is shooting stuff. So they all go back to the basement. It's obvious that Dan has gone a bit insane at this point, like properly snapped.
Which is entirely understandable. It's
Yeah.
more understandable than the fact he was ever part of the bringing Megan back to life thing in the first place.
Yeah, I mean, earlier he was making poor decisions, but here he has actually had a break. Because when Francesca says, like, she asks who the bride is, Dan says, it's Meg. Francesca has to rightfully tell him that Meg is dead, and that snaps him out of it pretty quickly. He's very upset.
Also, you're realizing again, Dan has seen the bride and immediately fallen in love with her.
Yes.
Because he does this with every woman.
Every woman. I do love when the zombies are trying to get down the door, and Herbert says, my God, they're using tools. Another popular thing from this film, I think, that people really like is Herbert's monologue about the work.
Blasphemy! Blasphemy? Before what god? A god repulsed by the miserable humanity he created in his own image? I will not be shackled by the failures of your god. The only blasphemy is to wallow in insignificance. I have taken refuse of your god's failures, and I have triumphed. There is my creation.
And that's the most Bride of Frankenstein bit in the whole film. That
Yes.
whole speech is all pretorious. It's all of that talk about creation and life, and we can do it together, and there's no need for some silly woman to get involved, is there?
What is
very,
God?
Very unnecessary.
The bride attacks Francesca because she's very protective over her Dan. There's also one point when Herbert calls the bride our girl. That's very cute. Little family. But they do a really quick 180, though. Dan calls her a monster and Herbert calls her dead tissue. 2 minutes later. It's a really quick turnaround. It's like they want to hurt her. I'm not really sure why. The bride starts feeling Dan up, and when he rejects her, saying that he doesn't want her body, she tears her heart out and offers it to him, screaming, "Is this what you want?" Beautiful scene.
Oh, it's great. And it's one of the ones that goes, like, funny because they cut out, like, her actually reaching her hand into her own chest.
Yep, and pulling it out, holding it out to him with all of the bits hanging out.
The arteries and everything hanging off it.
Oh, it's amazing.
It's great. When I was a kid, I had a book about horror movies, and this was one of the photos in it, was the shot of the bride, like, holding the heart out of her chest.
Yeah, it's a really good scene to just pause and see how many moving parts there are of the bride. The bride has a bit of a freak out. Isn't that classic woman freaking out because she's been rejected by a man?
Yes, and not just men, as Herbert delivers the wonderful line.
Make a note of it, Dan! Tissue rejection!
And the body, the head falls backwards through the body, and it sort of just disintegrates piece by piece as the dead reanimator burst into the room, start tearing everybody apart. And Herbert escapes into the crypt, and you find out that what he's been keeping in the crypt is all the little experiments. He calls them my rejects.
Yeah. There's, again, so much happening because the bride is literally falling apart. There's so many shots that are just an amazing testament to the physical effects of this movie, of the bride falling to pieces. So while that's happening, Herbert is trying to kill the zombies. Francesca's screaming. Yeah, you're right. Herbert is met by a lot of fun projects.
Yes.
Yeah. It's I'll take a screenshot of some of our little friends. They come out like they've opened like a weird cage at the zoo, crawling on hands.
Yeah, they're like the freaks from Freaks. That seems to be one of the big inspirations. There's a back and front man, meaning a man with a man on the front and a man on the back. There is a man with legs for hands and only a head.
It's very reminiscent of that scene in Society.
Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of ideas.
Yeah, it's clear that Herbert's been making a lot of things while bored, and frankly an indication that his heart hasn't been in it for some time.
No, he's just been having a go.
None of these things are good.
Yeah, none of these things are useful.
Bunch of half-finished projects. That's how you know someone needs to really focus. They've just got all these things they started and they're never finished.
Yeah, a lot of lockdown projects. Yeah, but they are very like Yuzna characters. And very Screaming Mad George characters. Herbert, Dan, and Francesca, they're all trying to find their way out of the tomb. Herbert's buried under some stone, and his hand is sort of coming up and then buried as the crypt collapses in on them. Dan and Francesca make it out okay.
I will say, it looks like quite an intense thing to get them out of the effect of the collapsing tomb. Like, I think both of those actors would have really been covered under a lot of dirt and mud and shit.
Yeah, it looks great.
Yeah.
Hillbat is stuck in some rocks, but he seems kind of happy about it.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's just kind of like flapping his head wings, and he's like, ha ha ha, I guess I won. And we end on a shot of the bride's heart, or Meg's heart, rather, stopping in her hand. That's the end of the shot.
Yeah, it's great.
So much fun. Love it.
Screaming Mad George and Brian Yuzna, they went on and did this. And this is, a fun splattery watch, but I do feel the bride's a bit of a failure. I don't remember, particularly what she looks like. I think I'm going to forget it. But it was clearly a great dry run, because then about 3 years later, they did a little film called Return of the Living Dead 3. And in that, they got a second chance to do a great female undead character with the character of, she plays a zombie love interest in the movie. And if you were a kid and you ever went to the video store and saw the cover of Return of the Living Dead 3, you'll know that they finally got their bride. Because she is fucking amazing. It is something that, punk rock ripped up, body modification, fucked up pieces of glass sticking out. It is something that you'll remember forever. So I like that they had to make Bride of Re-Animator to know how to do that in a way that works.
Bride of Re-Animator walked so that Return of the Living Dead 3 could run.
Yes.
Yeah.
And the film's fun too. I would recommend that as well. It's great. Sadly, no combs.
Apparently, Patricia Tallman from Night of the Living Dead, Barbara, apparently she was originally slated to play the bride.
It's a shame they couldn't get Barbara Crampton back.
Well, she was offered the role, and her agent advised her against it because it would have been very much a cameo. The
other thing that they could do, at the start of the movie in Peru, Dan is stabbed and Herbert has to save him and bring him home. What if the only reason Dan had survived is that Herbert actually uses the reagent on? And you find out that later on, and it turns out Dan's been reanimated the whole time and he's been fine.
That could have been fun, yeah. Yeah, because I've just realised that the stabbing doesn't come back. He's perfectly fine for the rest of the film.
Nothing about Peru comes back. I don't know why it's in the movie at all.
Well, yeah, because they could have just been doctors.
Yeah, they could have just still been doctors at the university.
Yeah, there was no reason for have this volunteer tour of duty that they had.
It's like the opening to a Bob Hope and Bing Crosby movie.
What, where they have a tour of duty and then they have to come back home to their wives or something?
Yeah. Then they're like, oh, we have to come back anyway. Oh, what, we got to do an adventure again? Oh, I thought we were done with that. Oh, well.
Yeah, Bob Hope on the phone being like, you want me to go to the jungle? Why?
Oh, man, I would love that. Herbert and Dan on a road movie. Or Road to Shanghai.
Herbert
just getting into mischief with Dan's in love with the princess and Herbert kills her and brings her back to life.
Herbert and Dan go bananas.
Yeah.
Herbert and Dan Hawaiian style.
I'm sure there is, I haven't looked into production, I'm sure there were a lot of ideas they probably had for the movie, and what was definitely the huge steam train that came the other way that said, make the same one, was just, we do not have money to do a big thing.
And I think that the script was written quite quickly as well, because I think that I read, I'm trying to remember now, they might have written the script in a month. It is impossible, really, to compare it to the first one, because Re-Animator is so many people's favorite movies. It's so good. A sequel is never going to live up to what it is, and it shouldn't. A sequel should be good but different. And
it should ideally be an escalation, because ideally your first film was successful, so for your second one they gave you more money. Yeah. And that is not what's happened here.
The original Re-Animator was about $900,000 budget, and Bride of Re-Animator was only about $2.5 million.
That's still a lot more Which I guess
it's double that, but $2 million is still not very much to make a movie.
And also, I guess maybe they looked at it and made a very sensible decision, which is we can either try to do it a bit bigger, but if any of our money's not being spent on the special effects, it's really being wasted, and that's true. Like if it wasn't for the fact that this goes balls out in the last act,
and I think it is different in enough of the ways that matter. Like I said, Herbert's vibe is very different. He's a lot less dour in this. Like he's mean in a very cold and kind of malicious way in the first one. Like he's painted as more of a villain in the first one. This one he's persnickety and bitchy in a way that's much more funny.
Because if you went to screenings of Re-Animator, everyone would have been laughing. Like it's a very funny movie, and that's why in this second one there's more comedy in it, because they know that this is funny, and there's less of the fear of maybe we're not taking it seriously.
Yeah, it's just funny in a different way, and that's what happens when you have different writers involved. I would say that Jeffrey is doing a good job to make Herbert a little bit different. Like he has a lot of what people love about Herbert, that sort of very slightly camp, uptight fussiness that he has, unyielding dedication to the work against all odds. And I do like what you said before. I like this sort of boredom that he has, that he's just like, he's messing about, the morbid doodling, because it's almost like he's reached the apex of what he is able to do without, as Dan says, publishing.
He's so nuts. And the things he's making are so useless.
Imagine having Herbert West as just your normal doctor. Like, we only see him treat Gloria in this movie. And even then, he's just there. He doesn't do anything to her. But imagine, like, Dr. Herbert West going up to someone and just inspecting them for, like, mumps or something.
Yeah, he'll insult you and tell you you're not good enough for his boyfriend.
Yeah.
Were there any other ideas for sequels? Like, did they have any other ideas for what they were going to do with this other than what we got?
The one that always gets floated around is House of Re-Animator, which was always meant to be the fourth movie. That was kicked around for ages. It was actually supposed to be this. And then it was supposed to be Beyond Re-Animator. And then it was supposed to come after Beyond Re-Animator. And it never got done because it was basically meant to be Herbert West reanimates the President of the United States. The story that everybody tells who was involved, like Brian, Stuart Gordon, and Jeffrey Combs, all talk about how it just got too flagrantly political because it was basically going to be about Bush. And I think around the time that they were going to do it, instead of Bride of Re-Animator, it was going to be about Reagan's assassination was botched. And then they brought him back. That's one of those things, like, it never got off the ground because, you know, at the end of the day, no one wanted to make, like, a really strictly political film. And how do you do that when you're working with literally the president? It's
also a very more openly silly idea than the other movies.
Yeah.
And it would have felt like them, like, going all out for comedy, which maybe wouldn't. I like the level that Bride of Re-Animator is, where, like, the jokes are all there, but also, you know, it's a workable horror movie Frankenstein riff.
And it's hard to think of what they would do. I wouldn't want them to make a remake now or a sequel, because frankly, I would want Stuart Gordon to do it, and he's not around. And I
would like a remake. Not a remake. I'd just like it. You know, you could give the Herbert West Re-Animator, the actual story, another crack. If you do an adaptation of the story, I don't think it's got anything to do with the Jeffrey Combs one. I think that's still safe. You know, if you do a H.P. Lovecraft thing, because they're very different. So,
well, I always wanted to see a sort of a prequel. Like, I always wanted to see the origin story of Herbert West, because when we meet Herbert, he's already at the university in Switzerland. He's already done a huge amount of work. He's already got his reagent, and he's already been testing it. Like, I'd like to see him discovering the journey, starting out that process of reanimation and trying to put forth this theory to other people.
I think I'd like a sequel, but it's like him working for the government and, you know, kind of like House of Re-Animator, but you're working for the government and, like, actually working with the defense forces. So you do that, because that's in the original.
No, don't make Herbert a cop.
Yeah, because in the story, like, they go off on their doctors in the war, and I think you could use that, and that could be real gross and, like, a full-blown special effects, like a full-blown army of the dead. Oh, that'd rule.
I don't want Herbie to be a cop. But
he's not a good person, Lisa.
But
Jesus. He's already a serial killer.
Hey, he's doing his best. He just loves his boy so much. Well, I mean, it is left open. I don't think Jeffrey Combs would do another Re-Animator movie, but it is left open at the end of Beyond Re-Animator. He just walks off into the night. So he's still alive and presumably still out there doing the work. Yeah, so that's Bride of Re-Animator. Are you glad you finally seen it now?
Yeah, no, it's a lot of fun. I wish I had seen it with friends.
But it is one of those things. The first time you watch it, you want to watch it by yourself because you want to take it in and make notes and such. But
well, definitely for a podcast, you got to take notes. But if anything, it may harm the film slightly if you pay too much attention to it.
Well, I mean, that's the thing. When I watch Re-Animator, I sort of, on the one hand, I want to watch it with other people, but on the other hand, I want other people to be quiet because I want to be like, shush, Jeffrey's talking. This is a good speech. I like the way he does this line. It's very funny. Listen. Are you listening? Are you watching? Get off your phone. Watch the movie. All right, Martin, anything to plug?
No, nothing. Got a baby. You want to buy it? No, I got. I'm at Martin Dunlop 1 on Twitter, and that's all that's really going on at the moment.
And you can follow the podcast on Twitter as well, at ReanimatesPod, and the same on Instagram. You can find us on Tumblr. I say us, I mean me. Very much a one-woman project. At Reanimates Podcast, I think, on Tumblr. And the episodes are usually up on YouTube as well, if that's how you like listening to your podcast. I know some people do. And like the Facebook, please, because there's not much going on over there. But you know what? I've got the Facebook. Might as well be using it. Just go over and like it. Make me look good.
You don't have like a send-off line?
No.
What's like a really well-known line from Re-Animator? Use the gun, Dan. It's a white beater.
No. Well, from the original movie, it would be cat dead, details later. Pod dead, details later.
I like it.
Oh no.
Pod dead, details later. Good night.